Hi guys, my name is Alexis. I'm an addict, an alcoholic, and a person in recovery. Kind of chronologically in that order. Um, Thank you, Jill and Mary and everyone for your service. Everyone here at AA and P for your fellowship, for keeping the parking lot open and yeah, for your inclusivity and loving me until I could learn to love myself. Today is day 35 of consecutive sobriety, but I've been in and out of the room since 2013. Um, Tonight, I hope my story gives you a glimpse of what I see as the insanity of my disease and how my untreated addiction, was pretty cunning, baffling, and powerful, as they say. Uh, so a little bit about me. I was born in San Jose, California. My parents were 19-year-old punk rock kids. My dad is still, he's an artist, he's an engineer. He's agnostic and a highly functioning alcoholic. My mom was raised in the Catholic Church. She got sober from drugs and alcohol when I was 11, and she stayed sober until about 3 years ago when her marriage and health kind of began to fall apart. My parents divorced when I was 7, and they both married new partners. They had a son on each side. Um, and this left me feeling pretty alone as a kid. They were in their 30s when they got remarried, and they were more serious, less violent, and they were in happier marriages with their new children. And I was kind of used as like a messenger between my divorced parents, and that's something that I said I never would repeat with my child. But addiction does run in my family. There's no escape from it really in our family. You're either functioning with it or it haunts you in some way or another. I come from a really large family. I have 30 first cousins, 10 aunts and uncles, the majority of which who smoke and drink or use drugs. And for those that don't, they feed their addictive brains in some other way, whether it be work or their eating habits or toxic relationships. I began smoking weed during middle school. I was a lead singer in a little punk rock band in middle school. I thought I was so cool. And my first boyfriend was the guitarist, and the drummer and the bassist were his two best friends. In high school, I started drinking regularly on weekends, and by my senior year, I was buying 8 balls of cocaine. And coke quickly turned into parachuting pills, and pills turned into snorting and smoking heroin. And by the time graduation day came around, like I had no idea what time it was or how long I had been staying at my friend's house, and my sense of awareness was like fully gone. By 2009, I was graduated and I was free to stay out as long as I wanted without communicating anything to my mom, and that's what I did. Um, One night I went to a pool hall and I ran into a kid from middle school, and he was actually the bassist in that band I was in. So we had an immediate connection, and we went to my old boyfriend from middle school's house for a reunion of sorts. While I was there, he had pulled out a meth pipe and asked me if I wanted to try it. And I pulled out, my black tar and paper clips and asked him if he wanted to try that. And we thought it was the funniest thing in the whole world. Obviously, it's not. But uh, the next morning, all either one of us could think about was like how to get our hands on the other one's drugs. So we spent the next 3 years on and off spiraling together, and we moved into his mom's garage, never left each other's side except to go to work. Um, we somehow like rationalized our addiction because we weren't stealing or hurting people. We were making art and music and traveling to San Francisco for parties. And um, we felt incredibly safe in each other's company. And that was until he decided that he was going to get sober. And I was left alone. I was full of psychosis. I felt incredibly unsafe, abandoned. Um, I was chasing shadows at that point, just full on psychosis. Um, I was hearing voices. I was running through the streets with pocket knives. I couldn't shake like the impending doom I felt on a daily basis. One night, I found myself on foot like miles and miles from home. And I found a fire station and there was a police car parked in the parking lot. And so I just dropped to my knees and begged him to save me. And I couldn't even remember my name when he was asking me, what my name and age was and date of birth. I couldn't even remember it. So after that, I continued to be 5150 about 3 more times. And I went to I went to emergency care for overdoses several times. I went to outpatient for 2 years through Kaiser's CDRP program. And when I left that program, I knew I wanted to stay off the hard drugs. And I needed to stick with AA in order to do that. So I attended 4 meetings a day, and I would literally just skate around the parking lot until the next one started. I did that for 6 months, maybe a little bit more. Then in 2014, I met a guy on Facebook who, after a year of chatting over the phone, wanted me to come and stay with him. He worked on a cannabis farm in the Sierra Mountains, and we were already falling in love over the phone. We were, you know, talking every day for hours at a time. So I packed a backpack, caught a train up north, and within 4 weeks, we learned that we were pregnant. I spent the next 4 years being told that I was wanted and then not wanted, that I was his future, and then being cheated on, that he was so lucky to have me, and then that he resented me. I went through a roller coaster of emotional trauma, but I stayed sober throughout that time. I loved my son so much, and I was so enveloped with the idea that I would raise a family with this man. I had hoped that, I guess I was more full of hope than I should have been. I was sort of becoming delusional at the idea that he would someday come around. And one day he told me he didn't think he had ever loved me, and I felt that I knew then that I had had enough of like his unsure behavior, and that I couldn't wait around for him to figure it out. And so I packed my car and I moved down to my dad's house with my son, 4 hours south of where we had lived. And that's when the drinking began. So my dad, who had been just divorced from his wife and me, drank day in and day out. I dropped out of the college classes I was taking up north, and I got a job, a really good job, actually, like a really great job. And I got an apartment of my own, and I was functioning as a solo mom, and I was surprisingly very happy. The drinking was like, quote unquote, under control. But I was still waking up sick, sweating through the night. I knew it was the alcohol, but things were still going well at that time. My reality was still intact, so I didn't stop. And one day my ex called me and told me all his regrets for leaving. And he wanted to be a better, version of himself. So we slowly began rebuilding our relationship, and I let him move in with us. We did have a wonderful year together. And then COVID hit. He was laid off from work, and I was working remote, and our son was starting kindergarten on Zoom. And we had nowhere to be. He had already been a pretty heavy drinker all those years. And with my recent drinking, I had a lot of acceptance for it at that point. So we quickly began to binge drink together. Um, Once my ex found a new job, he quickly convinced me to quit mine. I had been there for 3 years and I was really unhappy. I was having a lot of anxiety around it, which probably actually was also the alcohol. Um, I would get such bad nerves that I would throw up all morning before logging into work or before going into the office. And so he helped me write my resignation letter and he sent it for me. And at the time, I thought, what an incredible protector. He understands and. Um, but now that I was unemployed and I was physically dependent on the alcohol, I just couldn't leave the house. Every time I detoxed, it was a 3-day process. And then he'd come home with another bottle. So it was never ending. One day he did tell me that if I didn't quit, he was going to leave me. And at that point, I couldn't stop. I finally did detox and I got 30 days under my belt, but it was way too late for our relationship. So we spent a few weeks together. He was still living at the apartment and I was sleeping on the couch. And then one day I just emotionally broke. I went out, I bought booze, I came back to the apartment, I got hammered, I picked a fight. And then I called the cops to have him removed from the apartment. And during that time that I was waiting for the police, I struck at him. So the police arrived and they could see I was drunk and they just immediately arrested me. I bailed out after 7 hours and then walked home the next morning 17 miles to my house. I packed the car again, took my son to my mom's house, and 9 months later, I was employed again, but still drinking. And we moved into an apartment in the same complex as our last one. My ex kept the apartment that I had invited him to move into. And because I knew that this was my fault and I was the cause of the demise of the relationship, I wanted to co-parent. He dated other women and I was severely heartbroken. So I drank more. I got a DUI a year later on my way to pick my son up from school, and I was actually arrested in my son's school parking lot. 2 months after that, we went back and tried to rekindle our relationship again, which led to another drunken fight where my ankle was broken. Lost my job because I couldn't walk, was too drunk to go to the doctor or file any type of medical leave. He took my son into protective custody because this was a violation of the first domestic violence charge. My family rallied together and I quickly got full custody back, physical custody, but he still had legal custody. And I was too afraid to take it back because, I was going through domestic violence classes and DUI classes. So I just counted my blessings and took the full physical custody with him having 2 days of visitation and let him keep the legal custody. But then my ex met a girl on Tinder last April. She immediately got pregnant. And because he had full legal custody, he transferred my son schools and moved in with this new girl. So I had been doing really well at the time. And, I went and took him to voluntary mediation where I was granted 50-50 custody on all levels. And at the time I was living again with family. And I was doing better, but still relapsing occasionally. Then in January, got my shit back together again. And the co-parenting started to go better. I was even getting along with the new girlfriend, and I finally thought everything was coming back together. but I realized like I was living, basically trying to fit into my ex's agenda still. Um, Trying to kind of, I don't know if I was looking for forgiveness or what I was doing. Just trying to have a good co-parenting relationship. So I started getting along with the girlfriend. But then, I started being told, well, your work schedule isn't fitting our needs as a family, and your finances aren't fitting really our lifestyle that we want to provide for our kids. And, they knew that they were making me feel inadequate. And my ex would tell me I'm working too many hours, or I'm not contributing enough financially to my son's extracurricular activities that they can afford. And they had no recognition of the fact that, I was doing it solo and I was doing the best I could to be one person, with their family of five. So in March, everything just kind of started slipping for me. I, began having a box of wine delivered daily, which is like 3 liters. And I was drinking nonstop for like 7 days. My son was home with me and I didn't take him to school a day. And I spent the majority of time passed out on the couch. I lost my job. My ex came by and took my son. He had deputies show up to retrieve the key to our car, and he served me with an ex parte. Um, Sorry, this is really hard, but it just goes to show you, like the insanity of this disease. This has been ongoing for the last 4 years, and it's like it just goes up and down, up and down. And I somehow knew though that this time was rock bottom. Like I don't know why it didn't hit before, like regardless of being in this position so many times. Like this time by far, just the hardest. So I spent 5 days after having my son taken, detoxing alone. Um, Sorry. My cousin, who's dealing with her own life circumstances, and who is also in recovery, sacrificed her time to not only convince me to go, but she took my ass to the ER. And she took me far too, because we knew that a different county would give me better services. They didn't have a detox program, so they just gave me some medication, and they were about to discharge me. And luckily, I went into an alcoholic seizure. So at that point, I had to be admitted. I spent 2 days, honestly, with the greatest and kindest care I probably have ever received in my life. Uh, a social worker visited me, and although we were in Santa Cruz County, which is a different county than I live in, he found me resources and helped me to navigate the recovery options in the town, where I live. And when I got home, I arrived with 8 different prescriptions and a court order to not only stay away from my son, but not to call him. Um, I began to have like really dark thoughts and intrusive visualizations of how I could end my life. And I realized that I could no longer blame the past 4 years of alcoholism on my abandonment issues or the loss of family or stress. It was my addiction, and it was going to kill me. So I made a doctor's appointment that day. I got home and I scheduled an intake with outpatient, a program we have here in Gilroy. And my aunt, who's a retired police officer, she's She actually took me away from my mom when my mom was battling her own addictions and inability to get sober. She also took her own grandchildren away from her son while he battled his addictions. And she still raises them till this day. They're 17 and 19. Um, she immediately, came to my rescue too. And she drove me to appointments. She looked over my legal documents. She helped me write a letter to the courts. She went with me to the custody hearing, and she's called or texted me every day to ensure that I'm taking my medication and asking me about my program and making sure that, I'm not falling into the abyss here. um, so I know that this is my last chance. And every weekend on Sunday, my aunt drives 45 minutes to spend 9 hours as a supervisor for visitations that the court has allowed. So one day a week, she drives down here. And because of her background, she's able to supervise visits between me and my son, and I don't have to go through an agency that will only do, 2 hours. And I have to pay, like $165 or whatever, so she's doing a huge service in hopes of reunification. And she told me it's because she believes in me. And I don't think I've been told that with actions in the way that I've been told that this time from family and friends. And, I never thought I could be this honest with a group of strangers and a retired police officer and receive more love than when I was pretending to be someone I'm not. Being honest with myself has gotten me a lot more honesty from other people and genuine care. And being sober has uncovered a flood of emotions for me. And I'm not only trying to regulate my normal mental health issues like anxiety and depression without drinking to mask them, but I'm uncovering childhood trauma and neglect and abandonment, feelings of inadequacy and resentment, failed dreams and aspirations, financial instability, the shame of repeating my parents' cycle, the shame of losing myself, fears of the future. And yet, like, somehow every day that I'm sober, the last 35 days, I can feel myself healing these things. The thoughts are more aggressive, but how I feel about them is becoming less. And whatever I'm uncovering, I try to get honest about, and I bring it into these rooms and I watch, my friends all nod their heads in agreement. And I feel like a normal fucking person again, because my story isn't as unique as I allow myself to think it is. I I have a disease and I don't deserve to punish myself the way that I do in my thinking. So for the first time in my life, I'm truly proud to be an addict, an alcoholic, and a person in recovery. And I think that that's like the first step, like literally. So with just 35 days, I've already begun to see a lot of transformation. I know that I need to forever be in recovery, but I've been sincerely fortunate. I know a lot of people don't have half of what I have, and I've been there before, where the cycle just either repeats again or I don't know, but I just have to be so grateful for what I have right now. And I have a wonderful and compassionate sponsor, and I have a physician who, for the first time in my life, understands addiction. And, you know, me being honest with my doctor even brought out, the fact, she disclosed to me that she had struggled with her own dependence issues in the past. And I have an outpatient program that has counselors who are in recovery themselves and aren't just trained clinicians. And, I realize now that having acceptance doesn't mean resigning yourself to failure, and surrender doesn't mean giving up. But it instead means, it's time for me to accept my disease for what it is and surrender to the process of healing. And I want all of that, desperately. So I want to express my gratitude to the group for allowing me to share some of my story. And it is true what they say, AA, they'll love you until you learn to love yourself. I encourage other newcomers to stick around with me because regardless of how difficult this journey can be, you don't have to be lonely in doing it. And I want to thank some of the people here for being there. My first few days in AANP, Scott, Kent, Jace, hung out with me in the parking lot for hours my first few meetings when I was like way too sick to even like talk, and I just got to listen to them, and some of you have been there for me on a daily basis. Some of you text me when I'm just like feeling like shit and I don't want to text anyone, and Becky, you reached out to me almost immediately to give me mom support. And I don't know if Nika's in here, but Nika, hearing your story gave me so much hope for the future when I had none. And, Noelle in the mornings always has shares that hit me with, the beauty of this program. I mean, I could go on and on with all of you, but despite my situation, I have to say I'm truly, truly, truly lucky and grateful. And yeah, my name's Alexis and I'm an addict, an alcoholic, and I'm a grateful person in recovery. Thank you.